Hey y'all, and welcome to Geospatial Experiences. I'm your host, Melissa Mayo, and I'm an Esri engineer on the product team. This podcast focuses on the application of geographic information. Let's go on a journey together with some of my amazing coworkers, along with Esri customers, partners, and distributors who are doing really cool work in the field of GIS. Hi everyone, I'm beyond excited about this episode. We're joined today by a really special guest. Justin Madex is joining me today from Melbourne, Australia. Hi, Justin.
Hey Melissa, great to be here with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to talk with you and learn more about the GIS efforts in Australia through the state government and just everything that we're going to talk about today. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, same here. It's definitely something that I really enjoy talking about what we do, but what's possible in the spatial domain. So yeah, really excited for the chat today.
Well, great. I'm so glad you were able to join us. So you are the manager of spatial services at the Victoria Department of Transport and Planning there in Melbourne, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to have a lot to talk about from your experience there and your experience leading up to getting there. So I want to walk through that with you, and let's just jump in if you're ready.
Yeah, let's go with it.
Awesome. Let's go through your geospatial journey. Tell me about your background. Tell me about your GIS journey. Tell us how you were introduced to GIS. We want all the good stuff, Justin.
No, it's I personally, listening back to this podcast in preparation for today, this is, arguably the most, interesting part that I really enjoyed listening to, hearing how your other guests have sort of their trajectory to bring them to where they are today in the spatial industry. Everyone's journey is so unique. And when when we first talked about the podcast, I reflected on my journey, and my initial thoughts was it was pretty, pretty straightforward, but that time to reflect really highlighted some interesting steps. And I always like to think of my journey into where I am now in GIS as a series of sliding doors moments. If I'd gone one step the other way, it could have been so very different. But yeah, I guess I want to sort of, take us back to the start. GIS or geography was never something that was, on the roadmap for me. I always, when I reflect, I think back to high school and geography as a subject. It was never a priority. It was pretty boring at the time, and I always found it amusing that actually our geography teacher was also our sports teacher. So it didn't really have the
Yeah.
profile of, a maths or a science or, one of the sciences. So, I went through school, big focus on maths and physics and chemistry, and, had this vision that I was going to become an engineer. That was my goal. And the first real sliding doors moment that led me to where I am today was I'd put in my preferences for university, and it was all engineering. But at the last second, I thought maybe I'll have a crack at doing engineering and computer science, a double degree. Computer science, pretty fascinating domain. I don't know too much about it, but let's have a crack at doing that. And I was fortunate enough to get in, so I started studying in Melbourne at the university in the city, and was doing that engineering and computer science double degree. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that, this computer science space, this is what really excites me. This is where my passion is, really starting to blossom. But of course, there was still no spatial, there was still no GIS, and geography still wasn't on the radar. So I spent the next 5 years studying at university, and I was fortunate enough to score a graduate job up in Sydney at the end. So, I packed up my stuff and moved to Sydney, and I was working for a big finance company up there in their IT space. And yeah, it was fine. I was enjoying the work, programmer, doing that sort of work. But then that next sliding doors moment came along, and it was about 2 years after I'd been in Sydney, and I got the virtual tap on the shoulder from one of my old lecturers, and he said to me, "Are you interested in moving? You interested in a job with us?" And this was back in Melbourne. I thought, well, I hadn't been thinking about it, but they were offering to fly me back to Melbourne for a weekend, so I wasn't going to pass that up. So I came down and had a bit of a chat with them, and it was really exciting to hear what they were doing, because they were a consulting company, but they were doing a lot of IT work in the open source space. And I thought, this sounds they're really progressive. They're doing some really exciting work. This is a great opportunity. So packed up all my things and moved back to Melbourne. And things were going really good. I was really enjoying it, getting into this new space, working in the finance company. Previously, they were very heavy on proprietary software. They had great relationships with IBM. Now I was working in open source and everything was going well until one day this project dropped on my desk. And they wanted me to embed an interactive map into one of our existing applications. And I was like, oh, I don't know anything about this. This seems challenging. This seems hard. And I started to, have a bit of a crack at it, but it was not interesting. I wasn't interested, and I found it hard. So I did everything I could to push back. I, sort of reallocated tasks, got up other people to work on the spatial elements. But the more I pushed back, the more this work started to come in, and the more I struggled with it. What is this domain of mapping? And that's not even to mention the challenges of trying to pick up spatial references, coordinate systems, and the likes. But at some point, just bit the bullet and said, all right, well, this isn't going away. I'm going to need to start to learn it. And one thing about me is when I get into something, I really get into it. So I took a real big deep dive. I really invested some time in, understanding this space, understanding the libraries. We were using an open source mapping library at the time. And this funny thing happened. The more I got into it and, got over that learning curve, I really started to enjoy it. I found it quite fascinating, which was great because there was heaps of work for us to do in this space. And so over time and working in that company, we got to work on some really exciting and really fascinating geospatial web application projects and for a number of different sectors. We were working for the education department on an interface for students to get involved with mapping. We worked with a marketing company, which is still one of the most interesting projects to date, where we were using GIS to help target where they send different catalogs, different advertising material for the different sectors across the state, and the power of GIS in that domain. And we're doing a lot of different projects, but it was all in the open source space. And there was one thing that was missing, and that was Esri. It was almost a bit taboo in that company because that was the other side. We're open source. We don't talk about Esri. So we continue to work along. And then the next sort of sliding doors moment came along, and that was when one of our projects started to get a bit of profile online. And I started to talk to someone who was in the Esri space about this project, and we sparked up a bit of a friendship. And again, he gave me the tap on the shoulder and said, you interested in coming to work for us? And I said, oh, don't know too much about your company, but let's have a chat. And the company was a GIS company, but they had a very wide range of services. They did surveying, they did aerial photography, but they also had that geospatial solutions type part of the business. And so he arranges a meeting with their GIS manager, and I sit down with him, and we're doing the introductions. And then one of his first questions is, "What's your experience with Esri?" And I had to be honest. I said, "Well, unfortunately, zero. Haven't touched it. Got all this experience in the open source space." And then he's like, "Yeah, we don't really do much in the open source space. We're predominantly Esri." But I think one of the things that came through in that discussion was, my passion for the sector, my passion to do exciting work with the geospatial technologies, regardless of it being open source or Esri. So fortunate for me, they offered me a position, and so that was it. I was on my way to my third job, working in a company that was a lot more specialized in the GIS domain and had that broader range of services. And one of the things about that company was they were also a partner with Latitude Geographics, who are also now known as Vertigis, and they were the Australian reseller and partner when it came to GeoCortex and the implementation of GeoCortex implement solutions across Australia. So for those that aren't aware, GeoCortex, very similar to a web app builder or experience builder, a COTS-based product, but had some really powerful features. And so again, my nature is, I deep dive into things that I'm interested in. And so I really, invested a lot of time in understanding this GeoCortex essentials, but even more importantly, this whole new domain of Esri, because they were also heavily invested in Esri technology. So it opened up this whole new spectrum of technology and options, and it was really exciting for me, and all the new projects that came with it. So over the next 5 years, I was working with Double M, and it was a really exciting, a really fun time, and really big growth opportunity for me. I came in as a consultant, and over that next 5, 6 years, I sort of worked my way up to leading the team across Australia and New Zealand, and we delivered some amazing projects and worked with all manner of clients across Australia and New Zealand, government, private sector, and everything in between. And then that next sliding doors moment came along, the opportunity to move out of consulting, which I'd been in for over 10 years, and move into state government, move into the public sector, managing the spatial team in the planning department in Victoria. And depending on who I spoke to, it was very polarizing. Some people sort of see moving into state government as that you're going into the retirement home, get out your cardigan, this is the end. There are elements of that in working in government, but I also thought this is, a really great growth opportunity for me, and a chance to do things that I haven't had the opportunity to do before. One thing that I was envious of when I worked with clients at Double AM, the spatial company, was you don't see projects through the whole completion. You're there for a period as a consultant. And so it was one thing I was always envious of. I wanted to be part of it from the inception right through to the final completion. So off I go to work in state government, and I probably didn't initially appreciate the shift that was going to introduce, particularly around the people management side of things. When you're a consultant, I always like to say that 80% of your time is on the technical and 20% is on the people management. But then going into the public sector, that's flipped on its head. 80, if not 90% of your time is effectively herding cats, managing people. And that small portion left over is the technical side. But again, over the last 5 years working in government, it has been just a fascinating journey for me, and development as a leader, development as a mentor, being able to lead spatial projects within government and the challenges and complexities that come about there. But I look back, from where I am today, and I wouldn't change a thing, because there's been so many fun opportunities along the way. I've made so many fantastic relationships across each of the jobs, and just the chance to do what we're doing with the Esri technology, the spatial libraries that we have available is just it's just been fascinating, and just so rewarding. And yeah, as I said, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Now you get to be on a podcast, right?
Exactly. That's the cherry on top now. The one thing
That's
that
a
was missing.
I'm sure. I have no doubt. I do love your sliding doors analogy, because it's, you said if one step one direction, just one little thing off, and it could have been so different, and you just built a really amazing career, and you've gotten a lot of really interesting and amazing experiences because of being able to walk through the doors that were open for you, and being in the
It's
right place at the
true.
right time, and collecting those skills that you needed to go to the next one. I mean, you've definitely had a career that's kind of built on itself. You've taken those steps through.
It's so true, and I think that's what I've also enjoyed hearing from your other guests is, that those moments that have sort of really dictated where they are today. I think it was one of your guests, Emily, that talked about, sort of being told to go back to study because she didn't have a degree, and those sort of moments could go, multiple ways, but she sort of dug in, and is doing amazing work now. And I just love hearing how people have gotten to where they are now, and that also is probably reflected in the way that I have built my team. We're not a team of people that went to university and studied geospatial spatial sciences. We've got such a diverse group of people, and I think that's what makes it so exciting, and such an exciting place to work, and such a high performing team.
Isn't it neat though when you get just a diverse group like that, where you've got some people who did go through university and studied it and got the theory and studied it in the university, versus the people who have kind of figured it out along the way and learned it on the job. They have such different perspectives, but it makes for such a rich team.
You're 100% right. We've got people with their PhDs. We've got people that come from urban planning. got programmers like myself, we've got surveyors, and yeah, it really creates a great mix. And I think that's probably what's led to a lot of our success and a lot of the fun that we have, and different perspectives when we're trying to solve problems. That really comes out when you've got this diverse range of people.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's just it's awesome when you get that kind of diversity in the group and you have all those different experiences and perspectives. I think it pushes the envelope and it pushes you to be better, and you get out of kind of your comfort zones that way. I mean, someone's gonna, come up and say, "Hey, wait, I have this idea because I had this experience or I saw this thing." And if you don't bring in people with the varied backgrounds, you're just gonna kind of stay, I don't want to say stay stagnant, but you're gonna stay en route with the familiars, with the familiar backgrounds and perspectives and viewpoints.
Exactly. I guess we have a challenge at the moment. I don't know if it's probably worldwide, but recruitment of spatial professionals. Definitely in Australia, it's a challenging space because I guess the profile of spatial in the academic sector is not as big as it should be, which is crazy because when I go to universities and do guest lectures and people see the work that we're doing, they get so excited. But the the enrollment and getting people into this space, it's really dwindling and it becomes really problematic. But on the positive, sort of turn that into a positive when we do recruitment, we sort of look to those other domains. And ultimately, like you said, it's really helped us flourish and do some really exciting work. So, I still think there's a challenge we're facing with trying to get that profile of spatial both in the university sector, but also before that, in the high schools. How do we? I know in America you can see it's done really well. Israel doing an amazing job, and you see it at the UC. But Australia, it's really lagging behind, and I think there's something that needs to be done there to try and build up the profile of GIS in schools.
I agree with you. I feel like it's one of those areas that you don't hear as much about, and you just, especially didn't when I was going through school. It wasn't something you saw at the career fair when they came to the gym and set up. It just wasn't.
Exactly.
And it
No,
needs to be. It really needs to be. So we need to
it
figure out
really
how to
is.
be more proactive and be an influence for sure to bring that in. I mean, like if we don't do it, who's going to, Justin? We've got to do
I
something, right?
know. Well, you're probably gonna get sick of me saying this, but again, Esri do this really well with the user conference and the keynote guest speakers that are brought in over the years. The types of people, they're not always GIS people, but it's getting people from outside of the camp to speak on what's going on, and I think that helps build the profile. This year, I walked away from the UC after hearing Tim Wald speaks, and I was like, this is awesome. Someone at that level, and that was before he was, before what's happened since. But
Mhm.
just the way he spoke about spatial, I was sitting there going, this is what we need in Australia. We need people at that level, really highlighting how exciting and powerful GIS is. And it's probably something that happens every year. I walk away going, "Oh, if only we could get that sort of quality of speaker outside of the camp talking at the conferences and the likes in Australia."
Well, I hope that that can change for you guys because I think that would be incredible for the community as a whole to be able to have high profile speakers in different areas touting the value of GIS, talking about it, championing it,
Yeah,
get GIS out of
exactly.
the basement, guys. Like let's get them
Exactly.
out.
Exactly.
So we've kind of we segued off kind of from our planned, planned run of questions here, which is totally fine. I think that was an amazing opportunity to talk through, some things from an academic perspective and just the GIS community and, there in Australia in general. But, I'm sitting here thinking as you were talking about the the skills and educating people and bringing people into the GIS fold. You've been bringing on some new employees recently at your, with your team. So when, as a manager, you're doing GIS differently in your role now versus your previous roles, for one thing. So
Yeah.
how does that kind of feel for you? And then as you're bringing in new people, what do you really look for when you're bringing in this new talent? What's important for you? What are you kind of trying to identify? And I'm sure that varies based on the role you're filling, but what is important for you to look for when you're looking at, applicants and new talent coming in?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's something I really, really it's a passion of mine is, the whole team development, plays a part in your recruitment. When I was in the consulting space, I was very focused on recruiting people that had the technical skills. And I probably was, you know, too focused on that at that point in time. I needed people to come in, hit the ground running straight away and be able to go straight on to project work. One of the big personal development or personal learning since coming into government is that whole development of the team. As a manager, you really need to be focusing a lot of your time and energy on building the team, growing the team, both their soft skills, but also their technical skills. And that sort of comes through when we're in our recruitment phases. You might have two candidates, and I always, this is my classic example when I invite new people onto the selection panels is we might have two candidates, one that's quite good technically, but maybe doesn't have that passion for the sector. Or maybe they're just not a good cultural fit. We don't have that click when we talk to them. Contrast that with someone who might be straight out of university, but their passion for the sector is what is, really shining through. And there's that, that gelling, that connection immediately when you sit down and chat to them. So I've probably come to a point now where I'll put a lot more emphasis and value on people who have the passion for spatial, as opposed to people who have the skills, but maybe aren't that passionate about the sector. And typical things that I'll look for when we're interviewing people is, what are they doing outside of the day to day? What are they really doing to highlight their interest? Are they attending seminars and webinars and conferences? Are they reading blogs? There's so much content online. Are they really interested? And I genuinely feel that, reflecting back on the people that we've recruited, those people have gone on to do amazing things. There's been multiple people in my team that we've brought in, even in the last couple of weeks. They have minimal to no working experience in the spatial domain, but that has not been an inhibitor to them to do great work. I think it's about 2 years ago we recruited a lady and she'd never worked in spatial before. She'd done urban planning, but you could
Mhm.
just see that excitement in her eyes. Yeah, fast forward to today and she's doing, there's pretty much nothing that she's not doing. She's doing the 3D analysis, she's doing the spatial analysis, she's doing the web stuff. She's basically JavaScript programming our web mapping applications now. She's doing scripting, anything you throw at her, she'll just grab because she's excited to be doing the work. And I could probably list off, half a dozen other examples of the same sort of thing. The people that we've targeted are ones that are keen to learn and passionate about the sector. And ultimately that leads to some really great results.
Well, you can teach somebody the skills and the technologies.
Exactly.
You can teach that part of it. You can't teach them passion. You can't teach them to be excited. You can't force them to be, really, really, excited and passionate about this space if they aren't. And so I'm with you. I will put a lot more emphasis on somebody if they're excited about it. And, especially even if they're young and they don't have that, working experience, we can give you that, we have
Totally.
lots of projects and lots of work to do, and we can teach you the things that you don't know, but I can't teach you to be excited about it.
Exactly right. We when I first joined Stake, we didn't have a lead cartographer. We didn't have someone managing my cartographic team, and so that was something that we introduced along the way. And again, the person that I ended up selecting, it was a really hard process. I had two really good candidates that I was tossing up between, but what got the successful candidate over the line was that passion, but also, they were keen to learn. They hadn't had leadership experience in the past, but they were
Mhm.
keen to learn, and they'd really genuinely thought about how they would tackle that challenge. And I look back now, and in the planning department specifically, cartography is such a significant role. It plays such a significant part, and so he's been just fantastic for the growth of the team and the outputs that we can deliver.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that so much. So speaking about being passionate in the field, Justin, what are you passionate about in the world of GIS and geospatial? What keeps you interested in it?
Look, I could probably, boil it down to two key elements. One is simply being able to empower our stakeholders with the spatial technologies we have available. And people have heard me present it in the past are probably sick of me saying it, but it's 100% true. And the examples are limitless. How we've sat down with our stakeholders, be it in state government or in when I was consulting previous to that, and understanding what their problem is, and then being able to talk about solutions. What are the technologies we can use to help solve the challenges you're facing? And more recently, I this is probably why I love going to the likes of the UC and so forth. We'll talk those conversations you have with people, spark up ideas, and you take that back. And the work that we've been able to deliver to the department and to other clients previously, you can see now it's the spatial intelligence across the group is so much higher because we're making these tools and these data sets more accessible to them. And that is, largely and thanks to the technology Esri provides. It's it's an extremely powerful framework, and we're able to do some really impressive things, be it the analysis, the 3D visualization, which is a huge part of the work that we're doing today. The web, just generally speaking, there's so much capacity across that area as well, and it's just really empowering our users to be able to do their work more easily or be more informed when they're doing their work using the power of spatial. On the flip side, the other thing that just keeps me, well, gets me out of bed is that collaborative component of it, because I feel like it's such a great opportunity to share the learnings with one another. We're all trying to do the best that we can, and I think collaborating and taking the learnings and springboarding and inspiring and so forth, that's so critical, and that's what gets me excited. I remember I presented it at the Dev Summit back in, well, virtually at the Dev Summit, which would have been back in 2021. And, it was all online, but I had people from around the world reaching out to talk about the work that we were doing in the planning department here. And that just was just so exciting to hear, the challenges and the work that was going on in other planning departments around the world, and starting to share ideas on how we could work together. That that's so exciting. And it leads to such amazing results when we're not, duplicating effort. We're not wasting our time, but, we're sharing those learnings and helping each other along the way. And you only need to look at the value of the user conference and the Dev Summit, how, going to these events and, being able to talk to not only the Esri staff, but other users, and how valuable those opportunities are.
I think so too. I think that's, such a critical part of it. I think being able to the collaborative space that we have and just the general, collaborative nature of our field is so it's just fundamental. It's critical. It's so important for us to be able to do what we do.
Exactly right. And it's probably helped by the fact that, we're probably biased, but there are so many amazing people working in the GIS sector. When I was in my previous job consulting and working with all these different people across Australia, I made I made so many amazing friends along the journey, because we are we are great people in the spatial
Mhm.
domain. And that just made the whole thing much easier, working together. But these people are really great to work with, and that made that period in my life such a fun stage. Like, in my role at AAM, one of the challenges some people might perceive is that I was traveling a lot. So basically away from home every single week for the best part of probably 4 or 5 years. And but yeah, the people that I got to work with in those relationships just made everything so much easier. And even just the chance now to revisit that, and hear what they're doing, share the ideas on what we're doing. It's just such a great domain we work in.
It really is. I love it. We have such a good customer space. We have great partners. We have great, people at Esri and the distributors. Just going through every season with the podcast and coming up with a lineup and coming up with people to talk to. I mean, we've just I know I'm biased because it's my podcast, and the people that I have on, I think they're interesting, and that's why I bring them on the podcast. But we just we are not running out of interesting people to talk to with, really great stories and really amazing work that they have done and are doing. And it's just a testament to the community, the GIS community as a whole.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And that's been one thing that's shone through when I've been listening to the back catalog is each person has been doing such amazing work and they're different characters, but it's been really fascinating and I've really enjoyed listening to the different stories that you've shared. And I can imagine, there'd be a lot of other people who'd just be super keen to get on as well to share their story. And I just think you're doing an amazing job making these stories available.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that, one of your favorite parts of it is the part where people share their journey, because I do think that's super interesting as well. It's always a fun part of the podcast, and it's really what kind of got the podcast started initially. It's like I want to know how these people got to GIS. How did they make their way there? That's interesting to me. So this is really just the podcast of things that Melissa's interested in.
But there was a
So
gap in the market because, yeah, I think, technical podcasts are fine, but, hearing the stories and again, it's inspiring. I remember listening to David Crawford's episode and it's non-spatial related, but he talked about the advice that his dad would give him each morning before he left the house. You always be kind, considerate and understanding. And it's just like, it's little tidbits like that, you hear, but also the way people have faced challenges and so forth over the period. It's been great to hear.
absolutely. So, Justin, how do you feel like, have you seen the geospatial and the technical landscape change and evolve across and during your career? How do you feel like things have changed, and where do you think they're kind of heading?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think in some ways my journey's probably been a bit backwards because I sort of got thrust into GIS IT very from an IT background or an IT focus. And so when I was working in my previous job, it was we were focused on the web. Everything was web. When I joined state government, suddenly I'm being faced with a lot of static map production, a lot of cartographic work. And to be honest, one of my first reaction or my early reactions was, isn't this a little bit backwards? The
Are we
value of
behind the times?
cartography. Yeah, exactly. And that was, purely on me. I was very, very naive, but I'd come from that IT background and hadn't got that full appreciation for the whole geospatial domain. So, these days when I think about where we're putting a lot of our emphasis and where we see things going, that's that for me, or at least within government, we're putting a lot of emphasis on bringing together the designers, the cartographers with our web team. Web is definitely where everything's headed, making things accessible for one. And I think there's a lot of power in the tools that are available. We use the Maps SDK for JavaScript quite heavily within the department. We've built a large number of applications using it, but we also look to the other things. ArcGIS dashboards is getting a run. We're using story maps. We're using Experience Builder. So making the analysis and the tools and the data accessible on the web is really important. But you can put all the tools out there, but if the data is not accessible for our end users, it's not going to connect. They're not going to be able to utilize it to the best of its ability. And that's where I think the designers really play a significant part. And that's where I've really been putting a lot of our team's emphasis on is bringing the designers, the cartographers into the web space. And that's not just in 2D, in the 2D realm, it's also in our 3D applications. We've built a interactive web map using again the Maps SDK for JavaScript, making it easy to visualize 3D developments across the city. But the success of that's largely been driven by the design work. So that's sort of internally where it's going. But I think more broadly, it's the integrations where I see a lot of the excitement and a lot of the potential work starting to come through. We're leveraging, well, historically we've used gaming engines, but it's been quite separate from the spatial components. There's been a bit of a workflow to get them to connect. But now that we're starting to see those SDKs that bring together the Esri stuff, and the likes of Unreal and Unity, and makes it it sort of bridges that gap, but it makes it far easier to tap into the power of those systems as well. And the outputs that we're able to generate through Unreal in the department is amazing. It is a really powerful mechanism when it comes to community outreaches, media releases, briefs to the minister, and the like. So being able to integrate the spatial technologies from the Esri space into other platforms or interact with other technologies is becoming super important and really driving things forward, especially from where I stand. I guess we can all see things like Geo AI and Gen AI is going to play a big part, but I feel like we should be really making sure that there's strong integrations between what we're doing in the spatial domain and the other systems and technologies that we use.
Well, I think that's really important as well. I love that comment so much because I think that's one of the things that people probably need to be really thinking about and kind of how is this big deal, this big monster of geo AI and AI and all of this, what are we gonna how are we gonna wrap our hands around it? How are we gonna really harness it and how are we going to utilize it for good? How are we gonna use its powers for good, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Mhm.
it's interesting. Some people get a bit worried that it's going to take our jobs, but I honestly believe it's only going to enable us to do more exciting work or more empowering work, because a lot of that sort of manual work that we're doing now hopefully will be streamlined when we start to really lean into that space. So yeah, it'll be a period of change for people, but I think it's really exciting, and that's probably something that's really played out a lot, in my time in spatial is when you start to improve processes. Some people get a bit reluctant to the changes that are coming, but it's bringing them along on that journey and showing them, if we take away this manual work, you're going to be able to do so much more exciting work with your time, and do away with that boring manual work in the process.
Absolutely. So we've talked about your organization, we've talked about, your teams and kind of, touched on things a little bit, but really tell us what your team is responsible for. Talk to us a little bit about the Australia state government and kind of what your team's space is in
Yeah.
the bigger, orchestra of everything that's going on there.
Yeah, I guess the easiest way to describe my team is where we deliver all manner of spatial to the planning department, and that really does cover the cartographic work, the map production. There's the editing, the spatial data editing and management, and then there's the whole web and server infrastructure management side of things as well. So, if I was to sort of deep dive into that, first and foremost, the Victorian planning scheme, my team manages that. And, it might sound, quite simplistic, but we're working with over 80 municipalities or counties across Victoria to manage that statewide data set of the planning scheme zones and overlays. And the challenges that poses is, you're working with a lot of municipalities that don't have a high level of spatial competence. So we're having to sort of support them, work with different spatial technologies on their end as well. So that poses a lot of challenges. So there's the management of planning related data sets, but then there's the project part of it, and there's any all manner of spatial projects that come through in the planning space. Looking at forward planning into the future, looking at how do we plan out new precincts in you know permit permit assessment, looking at the approval of new developments across the city, analysis around cooling and greening, renewables projects. So we manage the approval process for solar and wind farm projects across Victoria. Heritage Victoria, that's a part of the planning department. And huge adopters of spatial technology and doing some really exciting work there. So we're in we're supporting and working with all these different projects and all these parts of the planning department. And then we've got our development team. The development team are managing the infrastructure. So when it comes to our ArcGIS Enterprise implementation and what comes with that, but also the development of the web mapping applications and supporting those. So a lot of work goes into that. And then we've also got one other function that's, sort of sits within the team, which is, around the bushfire and emergency analysis work. we basically manage the bushfire prone area data set across Victoria, which is really important to, when it comes to, being able to get insurance and, areas that are at risk of bushfire and, the necessary controls that need to go in place. So we manage those data sets. So there's an element of actually going out into the field and being able to assess where that boundary needs to sit. So, to summarize, pretty much anything spatial within the planning group, but the work is extremely diverse. But it really fits into those three categories. It's the cartography, it's the mapping, the data editing and management, and then that development aspect as well.
That's a lot of geography type stuff to manage, Justin.
But it makes it exciting. And I think, even though we have distinct teams, it's a really collaborative atmosphere. People work closely together. It's a really exciting domain.
It sounds like it would be. Are there any, you gave us some examples of some, different things that different areas and things that you guys kind of work in. Are there any projects in particular that you haven't talked about that you want to mention that you can talk about without disclosing anything that's, not okay? But is there anything in
Yeah.
particular covered?
I I always find, the work that we're doing in 3D is it
Mhm.
probably generates the most excitement and interest. The the shorthand story is, up until about 2019, we were leveraging an external proprietary product for our 3D visualization, and it was separate from our Esri implementation. So over the last 5 years or so, we decided, well, we've developed up a 3D platform for planning. And, it's basically made up of three aspects. It's the interactive planning centric web map application that we built using the Maps SDK for JavaScript. There's a parametric modeling service using Grasshopper and Rhino. And then there's that 3D visualization component using Unreal. But it's that platform that we've been working on, which has empowered a huge number of projects over the journey. But first and foremost, it's the approval of planning permits across the city. The Minister for Planning wants to be able to see how a new high-rise development's going to sit and interact with the existing built form. And so previously, the proprietary platform, it required technical specialists to run. It required a desktop that was, very highly spec'd up to be able to run the application. Fast forward to today, that same experience and more is available through the web, through our interactive web map. They can go in and they can see how a new office building is going to look, what's the overshadowing impacts, what's the visibility impacts, and so forth, and all through the web browser. It doesn't require specialists to be able to drive it. And that's been, probably a really rewarding project because it's getting significant use, but it's really adopting or leveraging the spatial technologies Esri makes available to us. So for me, that's probably one project that I've been really proud of. And yeah, there's a huge amount of other work that goes around it, but it was something that we built internally, in collaboration with Esri. But we brought, the team along the ride. It was their chance to upskill in this space. And so they're hugely invested. And now we've got this really fascinating and really powerful platform, which is just doing amazing work. So that's probably one for me that I've been particularly proud of.
It sounds like it would be, it has to have been a total game changer.
Yeah, it really is. And especially with the way that we work with our municipalities as well, they're super keen to work with this in this system as well, because it's just so much easier to be able to visualize things. And beyond that, you start to be able to tap into other components as well. With the 360 VR started to get used as well, because alongside that, because it just gives you another way of being able to visualize, how things are going to look. So yeah, it really has changed the way that we work, and it's really changed the perspective on what can be achieved within the department as well. But you know, there's so many projects that I could talk about, but probably one other I always like to mention as well is the renewable energy space and how we manage and work with the renewable energy team. When I joined the department, they were managing the renewable projects primarily through a spreadsheet. So all the projects were just in a spreadsheet, and every now and again they'd come to us and ask us to generate a few maps. Hugely inefficient. So first step was, all right, well, let's get this into a spatial data set. We'll manage the spatial data set, but let's get away from, manual spreadsheets, which are, there's room for error there. Then we put it on the web. Let's leverage the web-based spatial technologies that are available. Let's make that available to the users. Now, that's probably the first, sort of minor road bump is how do you get the users on board so they're happy to use the technology? But if you bring them along on that journey of development, make the interface really easy for them to interact with, they'll see, well, instead of me calling you up and saying, hey, we've got a new wind farm that we need to introduce into the GIS layer, they can go in and map it out themselves. Or even better, they'll get a shapefile from the developer and they just slot that in and they see it straight away. So it's streamlining the work and it's, really putting the power in their hands. And over the time, we've evolved that platform, and it's just been so really exciting and rewarding for me to be able to see how the renewables team are so invested and so excited to, be involved in the journey of the development, but also to be able to use the platform. And that's really empowered them to do things, but it's also freed us up to do the more high value work as well. So, it's a constant thing is how can we be more efficient and how can we leverage the amazing technology that's available to us all?
Well, that's a really neat project too, because I feel like if the renewables team wasn't super invested in GIS beforehand, if you've given them this tool and put it in their hands and it's made their jobs easier, they're going to be much more, interested and willing to use the products that you guys put out and utilize anything that you guys have available for them, or reach out to you and say, hey, I've got this problem. Can you work your magic for me?
That last part's exactly it, though, isn't it? Because it happens all the time. They come to you with more questions. They're not just sitting there, they really are pushing the envelope. They're challenging us and coming to us with, new challenges, which I think is great because, that's what we're here for. Let's do exciting work. So empowering them ultimately drives them to more, and they keep coming back with more requests, which is always great.
Well, and if they're coming and requesting things and asking you guys, hey, we have this issue, we have this problem, how can you help us solve it? They're being proactive. They're not just sitting over there
Exactly.
struggling. They're freeing themselves up by getting a tool, by having you guys build them something that frees up time for them too, ultimately in the end, where they can be more productive on something else. So it's a bigger picture business model, more efficiency, improved efficiency scenario too.
Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right. And I think it's one thing I try to like say to my team as well along the journey when we're working with teams or parts of the department who probably aren't as on board with spatial, who probably don't have the appreciation for what's possible. It's really important that we sit down with them and first and foremost understand their business case or what's the challenges they're facing in the first instance. Because like you said, they're not always going to know what's possible or have the right questions ready to throw at us. But if we can sort of read between the lines and understand what the broader problem is and come to them with solutions, that gets them invigorated. And then, things just start to really happen from there, which is exciting.
Yeah, I always love that so much when a new group, when you can make something, from for a new group with the geospatial component to it, and then that would get them excited, and they would come back later, and then they would just keep coming back, and you're like, yes, okay, this is more work, but this is more work in a good way.
Exactly right. It's the exciting work that they keep coming back to you and the challenges. I think that's what we all enjoy.
Speaking of challenges, what are specific challenges in the state government space that you have to kind of navigate, and how do you clear those hurdles?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question you ask. The typical question or typical response from a government person would probably be budgets.
Mhm.
Budgets to be able to achieve what we're trying to deliver. And early on, that was a real challenge. We didn't have budgets to engage consultants or to do certain things. So we sort of turned that challenge around into an opportunity. How could we still deliver something without the budget to support us along the way. And that's where I've really put a lot of emphasis into that training and development, giving the team space to learn, giving the team the opportunity to prototype and proof of concept things, because it has two benefits. One, it's giving people the opportunity to grow. So people are excited to come to work, of course, but it's also showing the department what's possible using spatial technologies. Because if we just sort of sit there and complain, well, we don't have any budget to make things happen, the budgets are never going to come. But if we can start to demonstrate, well, with some funding, this is the type of thing that's achievable. And so we'd sort of turn that challenge into an opportunity where we'd start to demonstrate what we can do internally. And subsequent to that, coming back to, the cycle of requests that continue to come into the team, now the funding is becoming available because people are saying, well, we know how powerful these platforms are. If we're able to provide some funding, can you make X, Y, Z happen? And so you start to get that momentum, but you've also got the benefit now of a really upskilled team. You got a team that's more technically proficient than they once were because they've had that opportunity to play, but they've been able to play and learn. But they've had that opportunity without the fear of failure because that's so important for us as spatial leaders. We need to give our teams that opportunity to try things out and not have to worry about, oh, this isn't going to work and there's going to be repercussions. No, this is an opportunity to let's put the Esri tech to the test. Let's really put it through its paces and see what we can achieve with it. And I think that's been a great outcome. So the funding is always a challenge, and also probably going hand in hand with that is the profile of spatial. As much as we talk about spatial and you sit in the various conferences and there's so much amazing work being done, I still feel the spatial profile, in particular within state government in Australia, it's still quite low. So it's really important that we continue to drive, put GIS up in lights. A lot of us in spatial, we're not extroverts. You know, we don't, sing our own praises, and that's what we probably need to learn to do better is celebrate the wins, celebrate the amazing work that we're doing. And that's ultimately something that I've had to had to learn myself, especially working in government. If we want to build that profile, we need to be showing people the awesome work that not only we're doing, but what are other groups doing across the world. And in the ideal world, I could drag our executive across to San Diego and they can see all the work that's going on. But I think that's the other challenge is how do we build that profile or continue to build that profile of spatial? Because we all know it's great, we all know it's powerful, we all know it's making a change. But how do we make sure that the upper levels of our organizations also have that same appreciation?
I actually really like your answer because obviously you said that budget is typical of what what someone in your space would say, but I love how you turn it into the positive and say, okay, maybe we don't have the budget for what we want to do right now, but let's impress people with what we can do and let's turn around really good products that are very supportive of our organization and show them how important this is and build this up from a space of can instead of a space of can't. It reminds
That's
me of
right.
the conversation you mentioned Amerly earlier. It reminds me of Amerly's conversation because it was similar. She had a similar take on it to you too. It's like we have what we have. These are the resources we have. We're going to do what we can, and we're going to excel at this space, and then hopefully the good things will come by us doing what's right, essentially, and doing the best we can with what we have.
That's so right. And I think one of my personal challenges when it came to government was there'd be a bit of pushback if things weren't 100% perfect or the plan wasn't 100% perfect. There'd be reluctance to go down that path. And I really come from a mentality that something's better than nothing. We're never going to deliver the perfect solution. So if we fixate on the perfect solution, we're not going to deliver anything. And so early on, my focus or my energy was put into let's deliver something. We appreciate it's not going to be perfect, but we can refine it and we can evolve it and enhance it. But let's get something, and because that's going to add value, it's going to add
Mhm.
a lot more value than nothing at all. And so that was a challenge early on trying to get people on board because there'd be a lot of reluctance and pushback of, oh, this isn't going to be able to do that, or this can't do that. It's like, well, I appreciate that, but we can deliver a lot of other things as well, and a lot of other things that you don't have right now. So that's a step forward. And then let's check it. Let's continue to try and work on those outstanding things from there.
I love that so much. I just love your positive outlook and your perspective, and just your focus on being a good leader and leading your team well and doing really good things for them too along the way. I love it so much, Justin. That's why you're on this podcast. I enjoyed when I met you at the UC. I knew you were going to be a great conversation and that you're doing just such great work. So yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for the comment. I mean, I think we're all a work in progress at the same time. You know, I've working in government has been an amazing opportunity from a personal growth perspective. You know, we've been doing all this amazing technical work, in my opinion, and hopefully others as well. But it's also that personal growth on how we lead our teams, how we grow our teams, you know, how we resolve conflicts and challenges and so forth. And I feel like that's been, you know, a really great part of this period in my life.
One thing I'm curious about for you, Justin, I know this would have been a big deal for me had I still been in the state government space, and it was a big deal when I was at the utility. But how is the kind of death of ArcMap as it's been called, and the shift to Pro? How has that impacted you guys? Is it impacting you? Because I know at the utility we had lots and lots of applications that were built in an ArcMap interface that it built in that platform. I know, at the state government we did as well. And so, there's a lot to move when you have to completely shift from ArcMap to go to Pro. So how have you guys kind of approached that? How have you attacked that? How has that kind of impacted you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I always like to observe how others are doing it as well. So our current state is we're 98% ArcGIS Pro, and there's that 2% that we're still doing in ArcMap. And I guess that's probably going to be a common story. So over the last few years, we've dedicated a lot of time to getting our processes across to ArcGIS Pro, and that's been made easier as we've sort of really ramped up our 3D work, the work that we're doing in the 3D domain, because actually you just can't do it on the other side. But there's also been those challenges because we had a number of tools that were written for ArcMap, and we've had to rewrite them and transition people across to ArcGIS Pro. And unfortunately, it doesn't always go smoothly. And there's always just those little quirks along the way. So, we're 99% of the way there, but there's just a couple of features, like most people, that just aren't quite there in ArcGIS Pro, and we're in that phase, or that sort of situation right now. Is, do we reassess our process because we can't stay on ArcMap forever, or do we sort of work with Esri, or raise the profile of these issues? And I think from my perspective, a really great story was we have one function that is just not quite there in ArcGIS Pro. And that was one of the things top of my list when I came across to San Diego to the UC. And one of the values of the exhibition hall is being able to talk to the developers, being able to talk to the product teams. And I sat down with one of them and talked about our process, and immediately they said, "Yep, we've actually got that on the roadmap for the next release." And it's like, "Wow, there you go, sorted." So I think twofold. We have to be conscious that the end is coming, and that's what we've been conscious of, and we've done a lot of testing and a lot of work to migrate things across. A big part of that was the training. When you've got people who, especially in government, that have been working with these platforms for many, many, many years, you also need to be conscious that it is a challenge for them. And so training is really important. And that's a big emphasis in our team, is training, and in particular that migration to ArcGIS Pro. But training is one thing, but it's also, creating a collaborative environment so that we can talk about the challenges, so we can share the learnings. I learned how to do this in ArcGIS Pro, make that accessible to the whole team, make those conversations, visible to all. But then it's also working with Esri and, talking about the challenges we face. And that for us, it was a really good story because we know the solution is coming and we'll be able to sort of kill off ArcMap. You've got to do so. It sort of comes back to that, something's better than nothing. So we knew we had to start, and we've been working through that and getting our processes across because we couldn't wait till ArcGIS Pro is perfect. We needed to get the ball rolling. And yeah, we had to sort of straddle two applications for a period, and there were some lessons learned along the way. But I think everybody would agree, we're a more high performing team. The power and the abilities that come with the newer versions, especially in the 3D realm. But there's always just those couple of projects that we have to fire up ArcMap for, which is always amusing.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you've basically been able to transition well, and I love the fact that you came to San Diego to the UC and found the right person to talk to at Esri, and they could tell you, hey, we're working on it. We're headed in that direction for you. I That's always been something that I felt like was super critical about going to conferences and especially the UC in particular, because Esri has people there who are available to answer those questions. And so
Exactly.
when I would send my team, or if I would go, I would go with a list. Like, we've got these issues and we want to solve them. Whether I sent people to the developer conference, or if it was the UC, or if we're at MGIS, whatever it is, that seems like to me, it was always super valuable for people to be able to have that one-on-one time with Esri. Do you also, I mean, I feel like you're going to say yes, but it sounds like that's also something that's really important for you to get out of a conference when you go to one.
You're exactly right. There's just one caveat I'll put on that is, and
Okay.
as you guys would know, and anyone who's been to the UC, it is chaos. There is so much going on, and yeah, it's a 5 day conference, but gosh, it feels like it's half an hour because there's just so many things going on, and
Mhm.
so I think what I've found personally is, yeah, you get to speak to people, you get to build those connections, but it's then the connections that you make at the conference allow you to sort of engage post conference as well. Because even for you guys at Esri, you've got everybody wanting a piece of you, wanting a bit of your time to have a chat, and so sometimes some of these discussions you can't really get into it probably as much as we would all like. So it's those relationships and those friendships as well that you can build through the conferences, which are even more valuable because I'll periodically touch base with different people from Esri across the Maps SDK for JavaScript and the 3D domain, and just sort of throw a question or query their way, and more often than not they'll be able to send me to a page or just give me some advice on what's coming up, and that really helps resolve those issues as well. So you're right, like having access to people at the conference is great, but oh my goodness, there's so much going on and so much to see and get involved in that you don't want to miss anything. So it's build those relationships, build those connections, and without pestering you guys too much post conference, it's sort of coming back to you when necessary or when appropriate, just to keep the discussion going.
No, I think that's great. I think it's super great advice too, to look at it from the position of networking as well, and being able to make those connections and learning really how to properly reach out, properly find find the right connections that are going to help you down the line as well. Because as you said, the UC is crazy. We're so busy. Everybody's busy. It's definitely a marathon, and we see and we meet and we talk to so many people that a lot of the conversations can run together, and you don't get into the depths that you really need. You as the customer, or us as the Esri person trying to resolve your issue, it usually ends up leading to like a follow-up down the line to try to really get into the details.
It's definitely one thing that is been hugely evident to me is that genuine nature. The staff that you have there at the conference, they are just genuinely invested in helping us resolve our problems, hearing what the problem is, and I think, again, coming back to I think it was David Crawford's episode where he sort of talked about, when someone comes to him with a problem, it's not always, we're going to immediately solve that problem. Let's sort of understand the broader context, because it sort of comes back to the way we work in the department. What I'm asking for isn't always what I really need. And, so it's the people that I've spoken to at the UC and the Dev Summit, you can really see they've got a genuine interest in assisting us and enabling us to do the great work that we all want to achieve using the Esri technologies.
Speaking of the Dev Summit, you went to a Dev Summit and you were a presenter. You presented for, was it a keynote or the plenary
Yeah,
session? Okay, yeah.
yeah, that's the one.
What was that like? What was the experience like? You were on the main stage at the Dev.
Yeah, it was it was quite the experience. Again, I'm not the most outgoing person. I've presented at conferences, Australia, New Zealand, and I presented at the UC as a user presenter in the past. But being up on the big stage, sort of a keynote speaker at the Dev Summit, that was just next level. Firstly, you just have to acknowledge, it is just such an amazing production, the way that you guys put on these conferences, and the work that goes on behind the scenes, it's just phenomenal. And I think that goes a long way to giving us as speakers a lot of confidence, and makes us comfortable, when we get up on stage, because we know, we've got that cast behind us, supporting us along the way. But it was it was nerve-wracking. You can't deny that. I feel like the run through, you do that full official run through the day before, and you get up on the big stage and you sort of look out and you go, "Oh my goodness, this is this is going to be insane." And the fact that it's live streamed, and knowing that people back home are going to be watching it and critiquing every little step and sort of mannerism you throw up. But um yeah, I think the support that the Esri team provided, I'm eternally grateful for, like, Julie Powell in the JavaScript space, because she had to sit through my presentation too many times, and she must have been sick to death of hearing it. But the the constructive feedback that she gave was just invaluable to ultimately delivering on the big stage. And it's the likes of those and people within my team. It's I'm up there presenting, but the work, it's not all my work, and even the presentation is not all my work. That's the amazing work being done by my team. So I think for me, getting up there, it was great experience, but it was also so it was just so rewarding to be able to showcase the great work that our team's doing to the world effectively. We're arguably, small team, 16 people in Melbourne, but being able to showcase that work on such a large scale was just so rewarding. And I know the team were super excited by that. They were watching back home, and in the ideal world we could all fly over, but yeah, it's always challenging. But yeah, I think it was a great experience. And yeah, you've had others speak about it on the podcast, the experience that it is. So grateful to Esri for giving me that opportunity. But, we can't do what we do without the powerful technology you guys put into our hands.
Well, I love that so much. I think you did a great job during your presentation. I went back and watched it, of course, when we were chatting and talking and getting ready for this. But would you do it again? Would you present again at that level if given the opportunity, or are you one and done, and we ran you off from the stress of it and all the craziness?
Oh, look, definitely would do it again. I think, if we were talking about, I have to sort of, always tell the story of when I presented at the New Zealand Esri User Conference. And I know one of your guest previous speakers spoke about the New Zealand Esri Conference, and it is an amazing event, and in particular the dress up party at the end of the conference. It's as your previous guest said, they take it seriously. I sort of I was sort of thinking, oh, dress up party. Not everyone's dressing up, but it was serious. And if you didn't dress up, you would have been the odd man out or odd lady
That's
out.
so.
100, yeah. But that one always stands out for me as a unique presentation, because I was presenting on stage with Gert. and Andreas from Esri. So two
Mhm.
big people from Esri, people I really respect and admire and, inspired by their work. And to be able to present on stage with them, I was like, oof, I better bring my A game. This is the big show. And they were great, in the lead up, they were fantastic, really encouraging. And come, race day, come the big performance, we're up on stage, and Gert kept, he's doing his spiel, and we all know how good Gert is. He was on the UC plenary this year, and the work he does is amazing, and he's showcasing that. And he keeps saying, I won't talk too much about this because Justin's going to come up and he'll sort of showcase a bit of that. And I'm like, oh, he's putting the pressure on me. So,
Spotlight,
I'm sort of sitting
spotlight.
there. Exactly. So he's going through his piece, and then Andreas, he does his piece, and then like, all right, now we're going to try hand over to Justin. And so I come up on stage, and I'm about to sort of prepare, and then I think Gerda or Andrea said, "Oh, sorry, we've just got one more thing. We just need to sort of go through one more piece." So it's like, all right, and so they're sort of shuffling around, and I'm sort of up on stage, sort of awkwardly, and I'm sort of shuffling backwards to let them, get back in front of the lectern. I sort of shuffle back, and they're sort of readjusting. I keep shuffling back, and shuffle back to the point that I fall off the back of the stage, and I,
Oh,
you know,
no.
in front of an audience, and I'm just like, I just quickly jump straight back up. My instincts are just like jump back up and sit down and just pretend nothing happened, right? Because no one had made any sounds, or no one had, there was no audible gasp. So I'm like,
Mhm.
phew, no one saw it. Hopefully no one saw it. And I had friends in the audience, and it seemed like they didn't notice. So I sit down, and it was probably the best thing because it just killed any nerves, because I was like,
Yeah.
well, things can't get any worse than that. I've fallen off the back of the stage and jump back up, and let's just get through this presentation. So got through it. It went, I'm pretty pleased with the way it went.
Mhm.
And then in the afternoon, I was catching up with some of my friends, having a coffee in the afternoon, and we're sort of talking about the presentation. And I'm just keep thinking to myself, gosh, I've really, I've really escaped. I've really gotten away with this one. No one's seen me, embarrass myself in front of an audience. And so we're just talking away, and they're saying, "Oh, you did a really good job, Even after Andreas pushed you off the stage, and I'm like, "Oh no!" And they're like, "Yeah, we all saw it. We just didn't want to mention it." And I'm like, "Oh no!" And so that gets brought up quite regularly. Next time I'm presenting, they're like, "Just make sure you don't fall off the back of the stage." And so,
Give me
unfortunately, I
some
didn't get off.
guardrails back
Yeah,
there. We got to get some
exactly.
guardrails.
Exactly. So it always my mates always like to make fun of me over that one, but luckily no one's got it on no, it's not recorded. So fortunately there's no video footage, as much as a lot of people wish there was. But yeah, look, the opportunity, given the opportunity, I'd recommend it to anyone to present at either the UC or the Dev Summit. It's not just the opportunity, but it's also what comes off the back of that, the discussions and so forth, and ultimately the collaboration that can come out of those presentations. So, given the opportunity, I would jump at it personally, but I'd strongly recommend anyone who gets that opportunity to take it, because it's the only way, it's one of the best ways we can profile out the great work that we're doing. And we need to grab that. And you just we are doing so much great work in the spatial sector. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, there's so much amazing work going on. And that's, again, comes back to why the UC is such a great event. Hearing what people are doing, the plenary is one, but all the user presentations that come off the back of that, there's so much awesome work that's happening. And we just need to be getting those stories up in lights. And comes back to this podcast, why it's such a fantastic idea that you and Remy have pushed forward with, because you're putting those stories up in lights and making them visible. And I can't say thanks enough for the work you guys are doing, and that Esri give us those opportunities at the conferences.
Well, thank you so much for acknowledging the podcast in the same vein as all of that, because I do think that, going for people going to the conference and having their, opportunities to be up on stage or having the opportunities to present their work it's so incredibly valuable. They get the word out about what they're doing. Ezra gets to see what they're doing. It's so important for Esri to be able to see, for people at Esri to see what the customers are doing and how they're using the technology and what's important to the customers from, from that perspective. And so I hope that the podcast does give a platform to show off customers and the work that's being done in the geospatial space as well.
Yeah, the stories. I mean, yeah, I typically throw it on when I'm in the gym and just, you're just listening to stories. You had your guest from the zoo, and even that in itself was such a fascinating story. But yeah, the diverse spread of guests you have had is awesome. I just can't wait to see who you've got up coming up in the future.
We keep having more and more good interviews, and yours is going to be amazing too. And so someone somewhere is going to be listening to yours and get tons of value out of it as well. I know. So yeah.
Thanks.
So if you're okay on time, I'd love to shift gears
Yeah,
and
definitely.
talk in a little bit. I wanted to chat with you a little bit about leadership, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's go with it.
So you've been in a mentoring and leadership role at previous companies as well as your current role. What qualities do you think are important to have in a leader, anywhere, but especially in the geospatial field?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that, I spent a lot of time, reflecting on and, honing my skills since I've started in state government. I think there's two probably primarily, well, there's probably a lot of things to it, but two primary things I always like to think about. One is the way that people communicate, or the way that we communicate to different people, especially in the spatial sector. We talked about it earlier, that we have such a diverse range of people that we get to work with, which is fantastic. But in order to lead and grow teams and so forth, you need to be able to appreciate that not everyone communicates in the same way, and not everyone sort of, you know, takes our communication in the same way. So there needs to be that level of EQ that we can appreciate people and understand, how they respond, and what's the best way that we can get our message, work with them and get our messages across, and also how they're communicating to us. So I feel that communication piece is really important. The other one I always put a lot of emphasis on is the opportunity aspect. Giving people the opportunity to grow within, put the caveat on it, we still need to deliver the work that we've got in front of us. But I'm a really big one for providing people with opportunities to grow. If someone wants to learn, if someone's in a certain part of the team and they want to learn something else, let's make that possible. Let's provide those opportunities, but also put arguably the guardrails around them, so then they're supported, and we're giving them the guidance, but also giving them enough latitude to be able to try different things, because ultimately that's going to lead to even more exciting work. So it's understanding where people are at, what their motivations are, and giving them those opportunities to grow. When I was in consulting, there was a client that I worked with, and the spatial analysts were always frustrated with their GIS manager because he was too hands-on. He didn't focus on the big picture or the development of the team. He was always tinkering, writing scripts, and so forth. And that's really stuck in my mind ever since. And it's one thing I've tried to hold on to since I started working in government and leading a larger team, because I need to empower my team to do the work that we need to do. I need to be giving them the opportunities, and ultimately not getting in the way. I need to be removing the blockers in front of them. And so it's a bit of protection as well, putting up that buffer so that they can deliver the work that they need to without those, the outside noise. But I think it's those two big things: the way that we communicate with our teams, understanding the way that they communicate and the way that we communicate to them, and also the opportunity, being able to understand, talk to our teams about what motivates them, what gets them to work in the morning, and what's driving them forward. And let's create some opportunities, or let's make it exciting for them, so they're you know engaged and not feeling frustrated or stagnant.
Sounds like you put a lot of effort into developing your teams and really trying to figure out, kind of what makes them tick, what are they interested in, what, like you said, what motivates them. That just seems like that's something that's really important for you and to you as the leader of the group.
Yeah, because you know, we we don't want people to be disappointed and frustrated at work. We want people to be excited because we're working in such a great domain. So as much as possible, it's trying to identify opportunities to give people those chances for growth. And that's probably been one of the rewarding things is seeing people take those opportunities. And it's not always on a technical level. Sometimes it's in the leadership space. I know I've got two people in my team, previously they weren't team leads. They didn't manage a team, but now they are. And seeing their growth and development in that domain has been so rewarding, and I just love seeing the way that they work with their teams now because they've been given the opportunity. They're super keen to learn, and now they're doing awesome stuff with their teams and building their own teams. It's really rewarding to sort of step back and see things like that.
So I'm trying to think about how to ask the next question. What does supporting your teams look like for you beyond, kind of building them up and giving them opportunities for training and kind of figuring out what motivates them from your aim, from your perspective as the manager of the team, what do you try to do to make sure that they're fully supported?
Probably first and foremost is trying as much as possible to give people the confidence to speak up and share be it their concerns or aspirations, because we can't read minds, so it's being able to hear what are the concerns. So I'm creating an atmosphere where people feel free to speak up. And I'm still in my leadership journey, my growth in as a leader as well. So these are things that I'm learning along the way. But I think making sure people feel comfortable bringing their concerns and their desires to you, and you're not going to be able to solve them all immediately, but at least you're aware and you can talk through it. And you know if nothing else, just make people aware that they're being heard, and you understand their challenges. You're not dismissing them. I think that first and foremost is really critical, so that open communication. But yeah, I know personally, when people are invested in you, when people give you the opportunity, it really inspires you and motivates you. And that's what I'm hopefully doing with my team, is showing them that I'm invested in them. I'm invested in their growth and development, even to the point that, yeah, people are gonna leave and move on to bigger and better things. And I don't always look on that as an entirely negative thing. I think some people, when they're handed a resignation, they might go, "Oh, this is, not good. We want to sort of keep it quiet, hush hush, or, sort of paper over it." I I don't think that's always the best way. I think sometimes it's worthwhile celebrating that, yeah, such and such has grown in the team to the point that now they're moving into an even more exciting opportunity or to a bigger role. They've learned all they can in this current role. We've been a part of their journey, and now they're going on to bigger and better things. And so I think, seeing having that element of turnover isn't an entirely negative thing. Of course, you don't want people leaving in droves, but I think, an element of turnover is valuable, and it shows that, yeah, people are growing. Because if you just have a team and nothing changes, then you sort of got to question that as well. So I think that growth opportunity thing is really important.
I think that's really good, sound management practices from your perspective, and I think that's a really good way of looking at it too. When you have someone that's matriculating out, when they're growing and developing as a geospatial person, and they have other opportunities, or maybe they shift to another team, or maybe they go somewhere else. That's not always a bad thing. You help them grow into the person that someone else wants, and that someone else is offering
Exactly.
an opportunity to.
Exactly right. It's actually it's a good thing if someone gets a better role, because it shows that you've been a part of that, growth and development phase. Because, you know, if potentially if you weren't there, they wouldn't have got the skills and the opportunities to learn so that they could move into those bigger and better roles. So yeah, I really that's a big focus of mine, is, trying to identify where people want to grow. And above all else is just trying to put people in positions or give people opportunities that will motivate them. Not everyone in my team is a JavaScript developer. As much as I'd love to have have an army of JavaScript developers and the work that we could do. That's just not the way it works. But it's not the way we really need it to work anyway. We need that mix. We need the cartographers. We need the people who have really got strong attention to detail with data. We need people who can do the scripting, the 3D analysis, the people who can engage with our users. And I feel like we're really lucky now because we've got a really good spread of people, and that's probably where where a lot of our success comes from.
I'm sure it is. And then you as a manager, you're putting a lot of effort in a lot of effort and time and energy into trying to build your team up. You're trying to do, really good things for your team. You're trying to support them and give them a positive environment. You're letting them be, free to try new things. They're free to fail and try again. And that's an amazing area to work in. That's an amazing environment to be able to work in. And so it's just, it's just awesome that you're that you are cultivating that environment for them.
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, like you said, cultivating that environment where there's no fear of failure, because we've got to try new things, and not everything's going to work, and yeah, just sort of continually help and supporting people on their journeys, and that's a big focus in our team, and I hope that that's what people sort of feel when they move on into bigger and better roles as well.
Hope so too. That's something that I always focused on. When I had a team that I was responsible for, I wanted them to be free to explore, free to experiment, free to fail, learn from it, pick up, let's go forward, and just give them a really good environment that they could, be geospatial explorers and figure new things out. I didn't want to, tie their wings down and keep them to where they couldn't learn. And when someone left and went to another team, I was always happy for them. Maybe I was stressed out for me, but having to fill that role and go through that whole ordeal. But I was always happy that they had found an opportunity where, especially, moving into a better role or, a promotional
Exactly.
type position. I was like, "Ooh, look at what a good job I've done." Like,
That's exactly right, though. You were a part of their journey, and that's the great part of it.
mhm. That probably didn't come across as good as it should have. But I do feel like it's important to try to build people up and not
Yeah.
dwell on the fact that if they shift or if they move or if they go to find a new opportunity, that that that's not a bad thing. Yes, as a supervisor, you have to go through the ordeal of filling that position, but
Yep.
they're going somewhere and they're taking their skills and abilities either to a new team, a new group, or a new organization, and those people are going to benefit from them going there. That new organization who's within the bigger GIS community, they're benefiting from it. And they're going to say, wow, you came from a great team. You have some really cool skills. Let's see what we can do to incorporate that more. So to me, it just seems like it's a big picture, big GIS community type conversation.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And even, that that next step, which is the recruitment of new people, even that's a learning for, especially for my team leads. Now they're getting the opportunity to grow and develop their recruitment skills, being able to build the team going forward. So there's a lot of benefits that come from that. And I think that, sometimes we just sort of have to not dwell on the negatives. We don't want to see good people go. That's definitely not the case. But there's a lot of positives that come out of it. And like you said, they go off into another role, and that might foster some really great collaborative opportunities with the next organization, and where you are now. That's only a positive, and I've seen that with people that I've worked with in the past, and we go in different directions, and then ultimately come back and we find ourselves collaborating together, which is always exciting.
Absolutely. So we're getting close to the end of our question list. I'm going to shift gears with you if you still have a few more minutes to hang out
Yeah,
with me.
definitely.
Okay,
That's
awesome.
been good.
Good, good, good. I'm loving chatting with you. We could do this all day, Justin.
I know, I know. I'm gonna have to basically block out some time with you next time I'm in the States so we can just shoot the
Absolutely.
breeze.
Absolutely. So, well, let's talk about the future. Let's talk about let me get your thoughts on what do you feel like the future holds as far as technology, GIS, and computer science are concerned. We talked a little bit earlier, kind of in that AI space and geo AI space, but let's build on that just a little bit more if you have additional thoughts
Yeah.
and more things you want to say, just kind of about where the future's headed.
Yeah, I think we all agree that the geo and Gen AI space is definitely going to be significant, and it's quite exciting to see some of the early elements that are coming out of Esri in that domain. But personally, I think in my space is that integration of spatial with other systems. I think that's going to be really important for the future for a number of reasons. The more we can integrate our spatial services, our spatial applications with other business systems, with other services and utilities and functions, that builds a profile of spatial, which is fantastic, but it's really empowering our users through spatial technologies. So, embedding interactive web maps within other systems, providing spatial analysis within other applications, bringing our power together with other systems and other functions' power, it's only just going to lead to bigger and better things. So I feel like we need to be open to those integrations. We need to be open to working with other organizations, other functions, other technologies. And you sort of see that with the way Esri operates in terms of partnerships with other technologies. But I think for us, the integrations we see in particular with the gaming engine space, bringing spatial, you know it's irreplaceable. But then bringing that together with the power of gaming engine technology and the visualization capability, it just makes sense. And you can see how amazing the results are. So as that domain evolves and grows, the results are just going to be even more impressive. So I think there's a big thing to be said about the integrations and being able to embed spatial into other areas instead of it being something like you sort of said early on, down in the basement. Let's really make spatial part of everything we do. And that's heavily dependent on us of, ringing the bell and just saying, yep, let's get spatial into this. Let's work out how spatial can work with that. Let's make everybody aware of how important and how critical spatial is, because that'll ultimately lead to such amazing things into the future. So yeah, it does require a bit of work. It does require us to be working with other teams, other technologies, but that's ultimately where I see, the success in the future going, is those integrations between what we're doing in spatial and those other technologies. I think we all see the continued evolution of web, and that's not going away, and being able to provide spatial functions, being able to easily provide spatial data to our users on the web, that's been around and that's going to continue to be really significant. But I think it's the integrations with other technologies which we really need to be leaning into and exploring.
I think those are really interesting answers, Justin. I feel like you've been careful and thoughtful about how you wanted to kind of approach those subjects, but I feel like the points that you made were really important as well. That we really need to be looking at kind of how those different areas are going to marry up and support each other.
Yeah, it's really important because I think this is something I've sort of noticed, stepping back, working government, it's not going to work if spatial is over here and everything else is over there. We need to be all together, and it's just going to build up this significant profile around what we do, and ultimately, you know, highlight it like it should be, because the work we do is amazing. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who looks at, you know, an interactive 3D web map and goes, that's boring or that's not interesting, or looking at, bringing spatial data into Unreal Engine and doing fly through visualizations, pretty hard pressed to find anyone who's not impressed by that sort of work. The analysis that you can do, you sit in the plenary each year at the UC, or you watch the plenary sessions, and the things that are available. This excites people, so let's make this available to everyone. Let's break down the barrier between us and them, and let's really you know move forward and do exciting things.
I think that's awesome. I think it's amazing in detail and amazing work. And like you said, we're doing such incredible things. The community is the GIS community, and when we can look and as we're looking at the future and where things are headed, if we can really just I'm trying to get my words together. If we can capitalize on all these things and all where technology's heading, and really bring it in to put it with geospatial and turn it into more of an enterprise approach versus we've got GIS over there doing really cool things, but if we get it integrated and it's more of from the business perspective, that GIS is fundamental and foundationally important for how we do how we approach these projects, how we how we work through issues and things. That just feels like, you know, kind of how we're going to need to be going.
You're right. And it has a one thing that's sort of come out of working in planning is, through what you've just sort of said there, we as people, the spatial people, we have such a we've become such a valuable asset because we not only know the technical, but we know the domain as well.
Mhm.
And that, how valuable is that you can speak from a business perspective, but you also have all these technical skills on the other hand. And I think, that's where us as spatial professionals, we're quite lucky because we, you know, have both those skills. I think back to
Mhm.
my time as a consultant, one week you're specializing in a water utility, the next, electricity, the next state government, local government, but you're getting such a strong understanding of all these businesses, and that just makes us as professionals really, really valuable. And we can do some awesome work off the back of that.
I think so too. I completely agree. What do you think Israel should be paying attention to over the next 5 to 10 years? What kind of trends, what technologies, what should we really be kind of keying in on and focusing and identifying?
Really, one thing, because I still have a lot of friends and a lot of relationships with people from my consulting days, and when I was working with a team that was delivering a lot of web mapping applications and specifically COTS based web applications, people tend to come to me and ask questions of, what should I do now? Even though I'm, moved on from that role, they'll come back and sort of ask questions on, you know, we're looking at our options. What should we do? And I think I'm lucky because I have an amazing lead developer in my team. He does things that, blow my mind. He's such an amazing special professional, and he's the type of person that you should get on this podcast because he would just have some amazing stories. But I'm really lucky because I have someone who can do some really amazing technical work, and not everyone. It's not possible for everyone to have a seriously technical spatial person in their team. So it's looking at the COT, coming back to those COTS based products, and I think that's where making the technology accessible to people who may not have, the highly technical staff or the funding to be able to engage Esri or the local partner, because at times we still need to deliver work, but we might not have the developer to be able to do the JavaScript development or what have you. So how do we achieve that through the COTS based applications like Experience Builder and so forth? And those platforms are really powerful. We're currently about to deliver a dashboard using ArcGIS Dashboard, and it's so easy to work with, and the results really excite our stakeholders. But I think it's that space, making the technology and the functions available to people who may not have the super high um, technical capabilities within their team, so that they may not be able to build custom JavaScript applications or work with the SDKs at the low level, but still being able to provide them with that possibility. Because I feel like there's a bit of a hole in the market right now when it comes to a COTS web GIS. Experience Builder is really good. There's a couple of other options out there, but for the most part, there's not a lot of options. And I think that's where people are a bit lost right now. So providing those functions to people who maybe aren't, developers is I think one area that would be really good to focus on. The 3D is the other one. It's a significant part for us in the department. We work with developers and architects. Per, um, they're submitting 3D building models for us as part of their planning permits. But the challenge we face is standards. There's no everyone sort of works with their own technology stack and their own sort of processes and practices. So we have to be very flexible, and subsequently, bringing that into an Esri environment, we need to be able to convert and translate and so forth. So I think a really important thing is, and Esri is doing this at the moment, but continually making it possible to interact with other technologies within the Esri stack. We saw that recently with the ability to use cesium data within the likes of ArcGIS Pro and so forth. That's a significant step forward and really powerful for us. So continually opening up those opportunities will be really key because you know one, it cements Esri as the platform, but it also allows us to interact with others who aren't working with Esri because, in Australia, it's a really mixed bag. Sort of coming back to my previous role, you've got a lot of open source implementations out there. A lot of people are using platforms like QGIS. And
Mhm.
so being able to work with basically anyone is a really important thing. So that, that's a couple of things that I see as where Esri could be focusing their energy. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think one on the other hand, I just sort of say continuing to do what you're already doing. We look at the Maps SDK for JavaScript, three new releases per year, guaranteed to have awesome functionality and that's driven our success when it comes to our 3D web application is the functionality that comes out and the evolution of that API. So just continuing to work with us, to hear our challenges and continue to just evolve the platform so we can deliver those awesome experiences for our users.
Well, we're going to keep working on it. We're going to keep cranking stuff out.
Yeah.
How,
No, but like, yeah, it's good.
oh, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I cut you
No,
off.
no, 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 all good.
How can Esri support the government sector customers the best or better? How can we improve
Yes.
our support for government sector?
I have a really, yeah, this is probably one that's really close to my heart is provide, again, we get real envious of you guys in the States because not only do you have the big conferences, but you also have the likes of user groups and so forth around the country,
Mhm.
sort of just domain specific. That's probably one thing that's not as accessible or available in Australia. So I think in terms of, supporting local government or even, pretty much any user, trying to create forums or opportunities for us to connect with other users primarily in the same space, say for instance, a state government planning user group, or provide a forum for us to come together who are working in the Esri space, so we can sort of say, hey, I'm doing this. Are you doing something similar? Or sort of validate what we're doing. That I think would be so useful. And sometimes it's hard to know who to sort of talk to. Like I'll have connections sort of scattered across different locations, but if Esri were able to coordinate that at scale, it would be so useful because it's expensive to get to the UC, it's expensive to get to the Dev Summit, it's a long way to go. And so those are the primary opportunities to have those discussions, but they're not always accessible and they're not accessible to everyone. So providing those forums outside of North America would be really valuable. And I I always talk to my team. We forge ahead and we're doing certain things, but sometimes we just sort of pause for a second and say, well, it'd be great to soundboard this with another government department. We're talking to Esri, we're talking to Esri Australia, and so forth, but someone outside of the Esri camp, let's just sort of say, well, this is what we're doing. How does that sound to you guys? And having those discussions, because ultimately that fosters collaboration, and we're ultimately going to do even more with the Esri stack as a result.
I think those are really good suggestions. I feel like, it's important for you to have opportunities to be able to collaborate and talk. And that was so important for me when I was in state government. We had kind of working group type things that were set up. They weren't set up through Esri, they were just set up through kind of the collaborative state government, state agencies, I guess is a good way of putting it. They were, kind of geospatial committees. And so that was huge because I got to meet my colleagues at the other who were at the same in the same
Exactly.
job positions at other state agencies. And then in my role, I worked in emergency management. And so when we had a big disaster event, I would have to collaborate with them, and they would support us during an event and would be, helping out or providing data or information, just lots of different things. And so it was super important and super critical to be able to have those people that you knew. Sometimes they would come in and work the night shift for me, during an event when we were working around the clock type scenarios. And so it's huge to be able to have people that you can call who are in the similar sector. Maybe they're in a different state agency. Maybe it's somebody. For me, I worked in Alabama, and so maybe it was somebody at ADECA that I would call, or somebody at ALDOT,
Yeah.
or somebody at, just, the Department of Conservation, whatever it was, depending on what I knew they had expertise in and what they were doing, or what was necessary. It was great to have those connections. And I still have a lot of those connections to this day. I mean, there's some of them that I still can call up and be like, "Hey, y'all, what's going on? What about this? What about this thing that's happening?" It's just networking is so important for sure.
It is, and that's why we love coming to the UC, because the networking element of it is so critical. But yeah, it'd be great at a sort of a more local scale, because I think, yeah, just like you said, calling people up and throwing questions around, and those long lasting relationships, it's all so special. And one of the things that I really enjoy about working in this industry, the friendships that have been made off the back of the work that we're doing, you know, just yeah, it's been a great time, and I just can't wait to see what happens into the future.
Absolutely. So I've enjoyed our conversation so much today, Justin. I appreciate you for coming on. I can't tell you thank you enough. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave with us and share with us today before we wrap up?
Yeah, probably just comes back to the one biggest one. I sort of always finish my conference presentations with this message, which is the collaborative element. I think need to we all need to just remember that how powerful collaboration is within this sector, and it's just so valuable, the chance to work with one another and learn from one another, because it's through that we ultimately drive one another to bigger and better things, that almost like competitive component to it as well. So I really hope that if there are others in the planning space, or doing similar things in the 3D realm, I really would love to hear people reach out for a chat, or even just to talk about the work that we're doing. I off the back of the last UC I went to, I've had multiple meetings with different people across the states, and we're just sort of showcasing the work that we're doing, and sort of throwing questions at one another. And it's that collaborative component. I just really encourage people, we need to be doing that. Let's not work in isolation. Let's learn from one another. We're all going to make mistakes along the way, but let's learn from those. Let's share those learnings, and ultimately let's push the whole sector forward. We're all going to be better for it. And I think, I really want to say, big thanks to you and Remy for the podcast. I think that's just another mechanism to drive that collaboration, because you're giving people the chance to share the work that they're doing, and ultimately open up those opportunities for collaboration.
I love that so much too, because I really would love to know that people are listening to the podcast and they find somebody really interesting and they're reaching out to them on LinkedIn and they're saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, I really want you in my network. I want to have a conversation." Trying to connect with them, shooting them a message, and having really good conversations down the line. Like I would love to hear that down the line. So I think that would be amazing. Or even if you run into to somebody that you've heard on the podcast at a conference at some point, and you're like, "Wait, I heard your podcast episode," and you guys strike up a conversation. That would be amazing to me.
Oh, you're totally right. And I guess be confident. Like, I personally, I'm probably the worst at it. I don't have the confidence. You see someone who's presented, or you've heard someone on a podcast. The confidence to go up to them. But yeah, we're all sort of, we all love a chat, and that was probably one of the best things. Coming off stage at the Dev Summit. The rest of the conference, people coming up to me and having a chat. I loved it. I need to probably be that bold as well. But yeah, reaching out to one another through LinkedIn. Let's share. Let's have a chat. We're all excited by the same thing, working in spatial. So reach out. Let's have a chat. And I personally really look forward to sitting down with you and Remy at the UC and conferences in the future, because I just love talking to you guys and talking about the work that we're all doing.
Well, and I actually met you because I was sitting down and talking to Andy, the
Andy,
AEC
yep.
of Denver, and you guys were connecting and knew each other, and Andy introduced us. And so, like, it was just serendipitous. I was supposed to be chatting with Andy at the right time so that I could meet you so that we could get you on the podcast. It was awesome.
Well, it's a funny thing you say that because when I saw you and Andy speaking, I was like, I don't want to, I don't want to bother them. They're in a conversation, and so that sliding doors moment right there, I could have just walked off and waited for Andy to be free, and we would have never connected. So it's so important that we're yeah taking these opportunities to network and reaching out to people and encourage anyone who wants to have a chat. Yeah, reach out. I'm always keen to have a talk with anyone.
Think that would be awesome. If it makes you feel any better, I get really nervous. Sometimes I send, notes on LinkedIn to
Yep.
people if I don't have their direct email, or if I haven't talked to them, or if I don't know them personally, and I'm sitting there and I'm trying to send it, and I get real nervous and I'm thinking about it, and then I just go, okay, I'm just going to send it. Or if I'm sending an email to somebody and I'm afraid that they're not going to want to be on the podcast, or they're going to be like blow me off or something, I get so nervous and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Totally understandable. But I think we're such a good group of people in the spatial realm. So yeah, I think we're super lucky to be surrounded with so many great people.
I agree. I agree. You've done an amazing job on the podcast. Thank you so much. I appreciate your willingness to do this, the effort that you've put in. You've spent a good bit of time going back and listening to other episodes, and you've really thought about them critically, and you've given me some really awesome feedback that I've, over the series of several conversations. And we're going to talk some more, Justin. You're not going to get rid of me today.
Well,
But
have
yes,
one more thing. One more thing. I was just gonna. I literally
yeah.
thought of this morning. I was listening to Jenny's. I think it was Jenny from Esri Canada's episode,
Mhm,
and it just like her bubbly character just got me thinking. You should almost consider at a conference, be it the UC or the Dev Summit, to do a live podcast recording with a number of either previous guests or new guests. Just get them on a panel because a lot of podcasts these days they'll do live recordings, right? I was thinking
mhm.
it's so cool, you get a bunch of people in the room, you throw some sort of audience questions, but you have a panel of maybe previous guests or a mix of new guests and previous guests because I'd love to the people you've had on have been amazing and I'd love to shoot the breeze with them, but yeah, that's just my suggestion for maybe a live podcast or even little get together of previous guests at a conference in the future. We'll sit down and just sort of chat about the experience.
I've told Remy too. He and we've chatted about doing a live podcast. I've been nervous about it because it's just this
Yeah.
whole like, oh my gosh, this can go any direction during a live anything.
Yeah.
But I think it would be super fun to kind of get people together, catch people at at the
Yeah.
UC or at MGIS or the Dev, and just have some of those kind of impromptu live conversations and just talk because I mean we're going through and I kind of prep questions for you guys so that you're ready, and then I ask a few things of you too as we go along the conversation. But having, the best parts I feel like of the conversation a lot of times are the dynamic pieces, the parts
Yeah.
that we just kind of get into and we kind of get in the groove and we get in the flow. And so I do think it would be super fun to be able to do a geospatial experiences panel and have either, like you said, either a mix of previous and new, or have like some, previous people come back and how are things going, like do a quick check-in. And I think it would be so cool to have like you and Dave and Amerly and
Oh,
several, get like pull from the different seasons, and just put people together and let you guys just start talking. So yeah.
and one last request. I really do hope that both you and Remy do a part two because I think there's even more. I just loved hearing both of your stories as well. So hopefully we get a part two of your stories, or sort of a diving into different areas as well. Because while you've had some amazing guests, hearing you two sort of basically interview one another was really great as well. So yeah, no, loving the podcast and really can't wait to hear the guests you've got in store for us.
Well, thank you so much. I'll have to twist his arm to get him to do it again. I had to force him into it on the first one almost, but he did a great job. We could get the two of us bantering, and that would absolutely
That's what
run
we want to
everything.
hear. That's what we want to hear.
So, well, Justin, I appreciate you so much. I'm going to wrap us up for today, and I'm going to keep you on my list of people to bring back in the future
Oh,
because I
that'd be
think you
great.
have amazing thoughts. You have amazing ideas, amazing things to contribute, and I feel like this is going to be a really good one. I'm excited for people to hear it next season.
No, thanks, Melissa. Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, can't wait to chat some more.
Mhm. For sure. Thank you again so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Bye.
So this episode with Justin was just so fun. I don't know what else to say to describe it. I loved it so much. I enjoyed getting to know him better. And one of my favorite things about it was, I guess this is selfish, but it was how much he enjoyed and talked about how much he's enjoyed the podcast, the previous episodes, the previous seasons. He really got into the details of talking about how he enjoys it, and the guests that have brought him insight and some different ways of thinking about things. So I just loved that so much. That's one of the first guests we've had that has come on during the recording and talked about how much they enjoyed it. So I just appreciate Justin for relaying that feedback and giving that feedback to us. And he has really good insight and perspectives on managing people and managing his teams, and what does it look like to be a GIS manager. So I enjoyed getting to know Justin. I've enjoyed recording with Justin, and I just hope everybody listening to this episode enjoys it as well, and learns a little bit, and can appreciate the conversation that we had as new friends and new acquaintances. So like I said, I just really appreciate him for taking the time to come on. That wraps up today's episode. Please feel free to reach out with your comments, or if you have an interesting topic that you would like to hear, please let us know. Thanks again for your time, and tune in for our next podcast.